Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Tony. Woo.
Hello and welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast. I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. Super excited to have you listening. And if you're an old-time listener, thank you so much for returning. I know how much effort goes into listening to a podcast. You have to be super intentional and you have to be somewhat motivated. So the fact that you're listening to this means that you care. And because you read this title, you probably struggle with emotional eating. So if you have not heard me teach before and you don't kind of know my methods, I just want to let you know that emotional eating is completely normal. As human beings, we're going to do it. The issue becomes when we do it too much or so infrequent that it really is starting to get in the way of your progress, your goals, your mood, and it really kind of throws a wrench into the mix. So I want to make sure that you have the tools in your toolkit to really understand how to navigate emotional eating. And if you can prevent it sometimes or even utilize this strategy in a way where after it happens, I think that you're going to find that you'll have more days where you're feeling more in charge of your food choices rather than the days where things kind of feel like all over the place and you have literally no idea why you're even eating certain things. So this 5-step strategy is something that's really not rocket science, meaning like it's nothing probably new where I haven't talked about it before. But for the longest time, I've been coaching clients. I mean, I've been a dietitian for 7 years. I've had my blog for 10 plus, but rather recently, I would say over the past 2 to 3 years is really when I decided to, I started my side hustle of my business and now I'm doing this full time. And most of the people that I work with struggle with emotional eating or a history of disordered eating, or even struggle with binging. So I've always kind of talked to them about, we've talked about mindful eating strategies and being present and being observant of your feelings and noticing your triggers and, learning how to navigate those. And I talked to them on ends about it, and it's super helpful. And I'm not saying that what I've given to them before isn't helpful, but I've been trying for the past 3 years to come up with an acronym that's going to really help them actually stop and think of their choices and really kind of assess the situation. So finally, something came to me. I didn't want to force it, but finally something came to me that made sense. And so as I'm talking to my clients and, we're always talking about check in, pause, wait a minute, when you're on that verge, when you feel like you want to eat because you're sad, you're angry, you're anxious, you're stressed, you're upset, you're bored, whatever it is that comes up for you, I always tell them to kind of pause and check in. I have my clients take photos of their food, which kind of encourages them to take that pause. And the word pause always comes up. Take a pause, take a pause, take a pause. So then I started looking at the letters and I was like, And anyways, I'm going to share with you a 5-step strategy to implement when you're on the verge of emotional eating, or even when you're currently in it, or even if you just finished, maybe you're listening to this podcast and you're like, I just did this last night. I'm so mad at myself. I just ate out of frustration. I didn't even like the food that I was eating. I don't even know why I did that. You can utilize this strategy here to go back. So really the purpose of the pause is to prevent emotional eating or in the middle of emotional eating. However, this strategy can be utilized after the fact. So anyways, when you are feeling that need to go to your comfort foods, I also just want to reinforce, like I said, I don't know if you're new to this podcast or if you've heard me talk before. So if you've heard me say this before, I apologize, but I want to make sure it's clear for new listeners that emotional eating is normal. It's okay. It's okay to turn to food for comfort sometimes, right? But this is where we're really trying to get a handle on, making us feel good. And if we're doing it all the time, chances are you're not going to feel really good. Okay? So if you're on the verge of emotional eating and you want to prevent it, I want you to pause. P stands for pay attention. So stop what you're doing, pay attention. A, assess how you feel. Am I angry? Am I happy? Am I sad? Am I tired? Am I stressed? You understand why you feel that way. Did you overbook your schedule? Have you not had any alone time? Have you only had alone time? Are you super bored because you haven't been able to find anything to do in COVID? Are you overworked and overwhelmed because you haven't had a minute to slow down during COVID? Right? Understand why you feel that way. S, set up a plan. So if you've listened to my podcast before, then you probably know that when you're currently on the verge of emotional eating or emotionally eating, it's helpful to maybe change location, to call a friend, go for a walk, journal, take a bubble bath, go in a shower, drink some tea, whatever works for you. That plan is going to be different depending on where you're at or what you need in that moment. Okay? But S is set up a plan. And then E, engage in whatever behavior you need to support that plan. So go do those things that you've kind of know will work for you. So it might be just stop eating, right? Just stop eating, go in another room. And a lot of people don't think that, they think once they're in it, they may as well just keep going because they quote unquote already screwed up. That it could not be further from the truth. The sooner you realize that you don't have to finish what you started, the sooner you'll actually get closer to that finish line. Not that there's ever really a finish line, because this is your life and you're always going to be, trying to be your best. But that is really, really true. So I'm going to repeat it. So P stands for pay attention. A, that's how you feel. U, understand why you feel that way. S, set up a plan. E, engage in the behavior to support that plan. So anytime you're on that verge of emotional eating, remember to pause. All right? I hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, please share with a friend, take a screenshot, share it on your story, tag me at tips_with_Tony with an I, or the Tips with Tony podcast. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.